Over Ravenbrook Lake, veiled in morning mist, a scene of quiet beauty concealed an unexpected turn. A sleek car stopped by the wooden dock. A father straightened his tie, while a little girl clutched her worn doll with trembling hands. From across the way, the sharp gaze of Thor, a German shepherd, caught every detail, sensing what was about to unfold. The next moment would change everything. What choice would Thor make when fate arrived? Watch the full story in this video. The first light of day spread slowly across Ravenbrook Lake. A thin veil of mist floated above the still water, turning the surface into a mirror that caught the pale glow of morning. The forest surrounding the lake stood in silence, its tall pines and cedars rising like watchtowers. No voices, no footsteps, only the distant cry of a loon drifting through the fog. The air smelled of wet earth and pine needles, sharp and clean, as if the world was holding its breath. Out of that silence came the low hum of an engine. A black Lexus appeared on the narrow dirt road and rolled to a stop near the dock. Its polished body glistened even in the muted light, out of place against the rustic stillness of the lake. The sound of the engine lingered for a moment before fading, leaving only the steady ticking of cooling metal. Behind the wheel sat Mike Caldwell. His dark hair was neatly combed, his suit pressed as if he were heading to a meeting in the city rather than a forgotten lake at dawn. He adjusted the cuff of his shirt, his movements precise, controlled. His expression carried no warmth. The coldness in his eyes contrasted with the quiet beauty of the setting. In the back seat, a little girl clutched a worn doll with faded fabric and fraying seams. Nancy held it tightly against her chest as though it were her only shield. Her curls fell over her pale face, and her wide brown eyes moved anxiously from the window to her father's reflection in the glass. The doll had been with her since her mother's disappearance, the single piece of comfort she never let go. Even now, as the car door opened and the chill morning air rushed inside, Nancy kept her grip firm, her knuckles white from the effort. Mike's polished shoes crunched against the gravel as he stepped out, his posture tall, confident. He paused, scanning the fog-covered water as if considering something far beyond the calm ripples. Then, with a deliberate gesture, he opened the back door. Nancy hesitated. The mist swirled around her, cool against her skin. She pulled her doll closer, pressing its soft face against her cheek. Her eyes searched for her father's, hoping for a smile, a trace of kindness. What she found instead was unreadable, an expression carved from stone. Across the narrow road, on the porch of a modest cabin, a pair of watchful eyes caught the movement. Thor, a German shepherd with a thick coat of sable and tan, raised his head. His ears twitched at the unfamiliar sound of tires on gravel. The dog's chest lifted as he drew in the scents carried by the morning air. Something unsettled him. His body stiffened, muscles tightening as though preparing for a command he could not yet hear. Thor had lived long enough to recognize when silence carried weight. The quiet around the lake was not the gentle stillness of dawn, but something heavier, strained, as if the earth itself sensed danger. His gaze fixed on the sleek car and the figures stepping onto the dock. He tilted his head slightly, reading every detail. The man's rigid stance, the child's hesitant movements, the way her small hands clutched the doll as if for dear life. The mist thickened, curling around the dock, swallowing sound and distance. To an outsider, it would have seemed an ordinary morning. A father bringing his daughter to watch the sunrise over Ravenbrook Lake. But Thor's instincts told another story. The unease settled in his chest, pressing harder with each breath. Nancy's eyes drifted to the cabin across the way. For a moment, her gaze met Thor's. She did not know the dog. But in that brief connection, something passed between them. Fear on her part, vigilance on his. She held her doll closer and turned back toward her father, who stood waiting, his hand resting on the wheelchair handle. The lake lay still, its surface unbroken, a stage set for what was about to unfold. The mist hid the edges, blurring the line between water and sky, leaving only the dock as a fragile bridge between safety and the unknown. Thor rose to his feet, his nails clicking against the wooden porch. The sound cut through the morning hush, a quiet signal that the calm was about to break. And on the dock, Mike Caldwell leaned closer to his daughter with a smile that never reached his eyes. Mike straightened his jacket, then lowered his eyes to his daughter. His voice softened, almost tender. "Let us enjoy the sunrise, Nancy. Just the two of us." He gripped the handles of the wheelchair and guided it slowly along the dock. The old boards creaked under their weight, each sound echoing over the water. The mist swirled around them, wrapping father and child in a shroud that made the world seem far away. Nancy held her doll tighter, her fingers trembling against the frayed fabric. Her father's tone seemed gentle, but there was a heaviness in his movements, a rhythm that carried purpose rather than care. The air felt colder as the chair rolled closer to the edge. Thor watched from the porch. His ears stayed rigid, his amber eyes locked on the pair moving into the fog. A low tension coiled in his body. Instinct urged him forward, but years of scars and an old fear held him back. He shifted his paws, torn between hesitation and the pull of something stronger. Duty. At the edge of the dock, Mike paused. He leaned down, brushing a strand of hair from Nancy's face. His hand lingered longer than needed, his smile sharpened, carved without warmth. Nancy lifted her gaze, searching for comfort, yet what stared back chilled her deeper than the morning air. Then, in one swift push, the chair jolted forward. The sound of wheels rattling on wood split the silence. Nancy's cry tore through the mist as the chair rolled off the edge and plunged into the dark water. The splash was sharp, violent, a circle of ripples spreading fast. Thor lunged from the porch. His paws pounded against the ground as he tore down the path to the dock. His chest burned, his breath loud in his ears. But the pull of the child's cry was stronger than any memory of pain. At the dock's edge, he leapt, his body cut through the mist, and hit the water hard, the cold biting instantly into his skin. For a moment, the weight of the lake pressed against him, dragging him down, but his legs kicked with fierce precision. Beneath the surface, Nancy flailed, the doll slipping from her grip, rising toward the light above. Her eyes were wide, mouth open in bubbles of panic. Thor's vision locked on her, the world narrowing to the small figure sinking deeper. He surged forward, jaws closing gently around her sleeve. With a mighty kick, he pulled upward. They broke the surface together. Nancy coughed and gasped, water spilling from her lips. Thor grunted with the strain, but his grip never faltered. Each stroke was heavy, each pull a battle, yet he pushed her toward the dock, toward air and safety. On the far side of the cabin, the noise reached Thomas. He had been splitting wood for the fire when the crash and cry shattered the morning calm. Dropping his axe, he ran, his boots thudding across damp earth. His eyes widened as he saw through the fog. The child in the water, the dog struggling to keep her afloat, the shadow of Mike Caldwell standing rigid on the dock. "Kaylee," he shouted, his voice cutting through the haze. "Get out here!" Mike froze at the sound. For a brief moment, his composure cracked. Then he turned sharply, rushing back toward the Lexus. The engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel as the car sped away, leaving behind only a trail of smoke and the echo of betrayal. Thomas reached the edge of the dock just as Thor pushed Nancy within reach. The girl's face was pale, her lips trembling, water streaming down her cheeks. Thor's body shook from the effort, his fur soaked, the taste of iron creeping from an old scar reopened by the strain. His eyes stayed locked on the child, urging her to live. The morning mist still clung to the lake, but the silence had shattered. The stage had changed, from stillness to a desperate fight for life. Thomas dropped to his knees at the edge of the dock, plunging his arms into the cold water. "I've got her, boy. Hold on." Thor pressed upward with his last reserves of strength, guiding Nancy close enough for Thomas to grip her beneath the arms. The old man hauled her onto the dock, his back straining but his determination stronger than his years. Nancy's soaked dress clung to her frail frame, her chest unmoving for a breathless second that felt like eternity. "Kaylee!" Thomas shouted again, his voice raw. From the cabin, Kaylee came running, her apron still dusted with flour, hair tumbling loose from its bun. She dropped beside the child in an instant, her hands steady from decades of experience as a nurse. "Lay her on her side," she ordered. Thomas obeyed, and Kaylee pressed her palm to Nancy's back. A moment later, the girl convulsed, a flood of water spilling from her mouth. She coughed violently, gasping, her small chest rising and falling at last. Color returned slowly to her cheeks, the gray pallor fading into fragile life. "There you go, sweetheart," Kaylee whispered, brushing wet curls from Nancy's forehead. "You're safe now." Thor dragged himself onto the dock beside them, his body trembling. Water poured from his coat in streams, mingling with the crimson seeping from a reopened scar along his flank. He sank heavily onto the boards, sides heaving, his amber eyes still locked on Nancy, as if refusing to let go until he was sure she breathed. Kaylee's gaze flicked to the German shepherd. "He's bleeding," she said sharply. Thomas reached out, his hand steady on Thor's head. "You did well, boy. You did more than any of us could." Thor leaned into the touch, exhaustion pulling at him. Yet his posture remained vigilant. He seemed unwilling to rest, not while Nancy stirred beside him. From the road, the fading roar of Mike Caldwell's engine echoed into silence. All that remained were the dark tracks of his tires gouged into the wet earth. A clear path of flight from the crime he had just committed. Thomas's jaw tightened. "He ran," he muttered, anger simmering beneath his words. "Left her to drown, and sped off like a coward." Kaylee pulled her shawl tighter around Nancy, wrapping the trembling girl in warmth. The child's eyes fluttered open, dazed but alive. She whispered something faint, her lips barely moving. "What is it, darling?" Kaylee asked, leaning closer. Nancy's voice quivered, thin as a reed in the wind. "Daddy pushed me." Her lashes lowered again, the weight of exhaustion pulling her back into shallow sleep. The words cut through Thomas like a blade. He exchanged a glance with Kaylee, both of them knowing that what had just happened was no accident. The tracks in the dirt, the look on Mike's face before he fled, the confession whispered by a child. It all pointed to the same chilling truth. Kaylee stroked Nancy's damp hair, her voice soft but firm. "She's with us now. That's what matters. We'll keep her safe." Thor shifted, his muzzle pressing against Nancy's arm. Despite the blood staining his coat and the fatigue in his limbs, his eyes glimmered with quiet determination. He had chosen his place. Guardian, savior, unyielding protector. Thomas rose, scanning the lake still veiled in mist. Somewhere beyond the fog, the world was already moving, unaware of the story that had just begun on this lonely dock. But the truth had a way of finding light, and far down the shoreline, unnoticed for now, A fisherman adjusted the angle of his phone, lowering it with trembling hands. The device had captured everything. The splash, the dog's leap, the desperate battle against the water. The first spark had been struck. The fisherman sat on an overturned bucket, his breath fogging in the cool morning air. His heart still hammered from what he had just witnessed. He replayed the video on his phone, the grainy image showing the black car, the wheelchair tipping, and the German shepherd plunging into the lake without hesitation. The sounds were faint, but the struggle was clear. The desperate fight of a dog pulling a child from death's grip. His thumb hovered over the screen. For a moment, doubt gnawed at him. Was it his place to share something so raw? But the thought of staying silent felt heavier. He opened his social media app and uploaded the video. For the caption, he typed only 2 words: Hero Thor. By the time he packed away his gear and started the long walk home, the first notifications were already pouring in. Likes, comments, shares. The ripples had begun. Across town, a teenager scrolling through his feed paused, eyes widening. "Mom, look at this," he shouted, turning his phone around. Within hours, the video was everywhere. On neighborhood pages, animal rescue forums, even the local news outlet's website. The image of Thor, drenched and bleeding yet refusing to let go of the girl, burned into the public's imagination. The hashtag Hero Thor trended within a single afternoon. Memes were made, tributes posted, sketches drawn. Strangers wrote long posts about the courage of a dog who had done what few humans might have dared. But as with all stories, the questions followed. Some comments celebrated. "That dog deserves a medal." "German shepherds are angels with fur. This child is alive because of him." Others cast doubt. "Looks staged. Why would someone just film instead of helping? Where was the father? Why does the car speed off? Could this have been an accident that people are twisting for clicks?" News anchors debated on live broadcasts, their voices measured but urgent. "The video raises troubling questions," one said, gesturing to the grainy footage on screen. "Is this the heroic rescue it appears to be? Or is there a darker story behind the surface?" Clips of the car's sudden departure replayed again and again. The absence of a returning father, the chilling stillness of the dock, it all pointed to more than a tragic accident. In online forums, theories bloomed. Some users claimed they recognized Mike Caldwell, a wealthy businessman known for his charity work. Others argued it was coincidence, that the man in the video could have been anyone. The split between accident and intent deepened, each side sharpening its stance. Yet through the noise, one truth held steady: the heroism of Thor. No voice disputed the dog's devotion. Even skeptics admitted the German shepherd's leap into the water was real, his battle against the current undeniable. In a world full of gray, Thor was the shining point of light everyone clung to. That night, as the video crossed 500,000 views, strangers who had never met Nancy whispered prayers for the unknown girl. And beneath the swirl of praise and suspicion, a few sharp-eyed watchers asked the question others avoided. If the father left, what was he leaving behind? Back at Ravenbrook, Thomas stood at the edge of his porch, phone in hand. A neighbor had forwarded him the viral video with the comment, "Isn't this near your place?" He watched the shaky clip in silence, his jaw tightening. The world now knew what Thor had done, but they did not yet know the truth about the man who fled. Behind him, Kaylee's voice carried from inside. "She's asleep, exhausted, but safe for now." Thomas pocketed the phone, his eyes drawn to the darkened tree line where tire marks still scarred the earth. The story had leapt into the world, but the answers still waited in shadows. The first flame had been struck, and it would only spread wider. Thomas lifted Nancy from the truck as carefully as if she were porcelain. Her small frame sagged against his shoulder, wet clothes clinging, breath still uneven. Kaylee rushed forward, wrapping a blanket around the child before guiding them into the warmth of the wooden cabin. Inside, the fire crackled low, throwing amber light against the walls. Kaylee laid Nancy on the old sofa, tucking the blanket snugly. Thor followed, dripping lake water onto the floorboards, his gaze locked on the girl. Every rise and fall of her chest seemed to ease his own ragged breathing. Thomas crouched nearby, his voice gentle. "You're safe here, little one. Rest." Nancy stirred faintly, her lashes fluttering. She clutched for her doll, but found only the edge of the blanket. Her lips moved in a whisper, too faint to catch. Kaylee brushed damp curls from her forehead, then glanced down at the child's backpack lying on the floor. The fabric was damp but intact. Kaylee opened it, searching for dry clothes, and froze. Tucked in the corner was a small bottle, its label worn, the cap half unscrewed. Inside were pale tablets, far too many for a child to carry. She turned the bottle over in her hands, her stomach tightening. The markings looked odd, as though the label had been altered. "Thomas?" she called softly, showing him. His brow furrowed. "Medicine?" "Maybe," Kaylee murmured. "But not the kind I'd give to a child." Her years of nursing whispered warnings she could not yet name. Nancy shifted in her sleep, a small moan slipping past her lips. She tossed, fingers twitching as if grasping for something unseen. Kaylee leaned close, whispering soothing words. But the girl's face tightened, her breath quickened. In the dream, Nancy's chair rolled across a meadow filled with blue wings. Butterflies danced in the sunlight, their glow almost otherworldly. At the center stood a cottage, its roof kissed by vines, its windows open wide. Her mother's voice echoed across the field, soft, calling, full of love. "Come home, Nancy. The blue butterfly house is waiting." Nancy reached for it, but the meadow blurred, fading into shadows. She whimpered, tossing harder. "Mommy, the butterflies." Kaylee's eyes brimmed with tears as she stroked Nancy's hair. "She's dreaming," she whispered. "Something her mother told her, maybe." Thor shifted from his place near the hearth. He padded to the door, lowering his heavy body across the threshold. His ears flicked at every creak of the forest beyond. Each time Nancy stirred, he lifted his head, a soft whine escaping, before settling again into his watch. Thomas rose and placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. "You know, don't you?" he muttered, almost to himself. Thor blinked, eyes steady and unyielding, as if answering without words. The night stretched on, the cabin wrapped in uneasy silence. Kaylee sat by the sofa, holding Nancy's small hand. Thomas remained near the window, watching the tree line where tire tracks cut the earth. Somewhere out there, Mike Caldwell was driving deeper into lies. Somewhere out there, the truth waited, heavy as the mist on Ravenbrook. Nancy's breathing steadied, her body sinking deeper into rest. But her lips moved once more, clear this time. "The blue butterfly house. Mommy's secret." Thomas exchanged a glance with Kaylee, both shaken by the weight of the words. There was more here than a failed rescue, more than a father fleeing into the dark. The fire burned lower, casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the lake whispered against the shore. Thor's chest rose and fell, muscles tense even in exhaustion. He did not close his eyes. Not fully. His duty was not finished. And as dawn neared, Thomas knew the hardest part was still ahead. The child carried memories too heavy for her years, and those memories would soon surface. The first light of morning slipped through the curtains, pale and muted. Nancy stirred under the quilt, her lashes trembling as if fighting shadows that clung to her dreams. When she opened her eyes, she did not speak right away. She only held her doll close and stared at the crackling fire until her breathing steadied. Kaylee brushed her hair back. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Nancy hesitated, her voice faint. "Tired and heavy, like my head is full of fog." Thomas crouched nearby, his face calm but watchful. "Sometimes memories feel like that," he said. "They wait until we are ready." Nancy's small fingers tightened around the doll's faded dress. Slowly, haltingly, the memories began to spill out. She remembered nights when the house was too quiet, except for her father's voice. He would close himself in the study, speaking in low tones to people she never saw. Sometimes his laughter was sharp, nothing like the gentle smile he showed in public. Other times, the words came fast, angry, his voice rising until it rattled the glass. Nancy would sit at the top of the stairs, listening, her heart thudding, though she could not understand all that was said. One night stood out clearer than the rest. She had wheeled herself into the hallway for a drink of water. The study door was open just a crack, and she had heard him say, "The books must be clean before the audit. No mistakes." Another man's voice had answered, deep and careless, "Relax, Mike. Nobody checks charities that closely." Nancy's lips trembled as she spoke the words aloud now. Thomas and Kaylee exchanged a glance, both recognizing the weight behind them. Then came the pills. Her father would hand them to her with a glass of water, his eyes cold despite his gentle words. "These will help you feel better, Nancy." At first, they only made her sleepy. Then, over time, they clouded everything. She forgot her lessons, lost track of days, and drifted through hours as though underwater. "I tried to tell my tutor once," Nancy whispered, her voice breaking. "Miss Winters. I told her the medicine hurt me. She believed me, but the next day she was gone. Daddy said she found another job." Tears welled in Kaylee's eyes as she held Nancy's hand tighter. "Oh, darling." Thor stirred from his place by the door. He rose, walked to Nancy, and rested his head on her lap. Nancy stroked his damp fur, her fingers finding comfort in the steady warmth. "There were times," she continued softly, "when the fog was so strong, I thought I would sink into it forever. But Thor always knew. He would nudge me, bark at me, lick my face until I opened my eyes again. Even when I wanted to sleep, he would not let me. He saved me over and over, even before the lake." Her voice trailed off, and she leaned against the dog's neck. Thor remained still, his amber eyes steady, as if he understood every word. Thomas pressed his lips together, fighting the anger that burned beneath his calm. He had seen many kinds of cruelty in his years, but this, using a child's trust to keep her silent, cut deeper than most. Kaylee whispered, "You are safe now, Nancy. No more pills. No more nights alone with that fear." Nancy nodded, though her eyes remained troubled. She glanced toward the doll she still clutched. "Mommy used to tell me stories about butterflies," she murmured. "She said they would lead me to her if I ever got lost." Thomas bent closer, his voice low. "What kind of butterflies?" "The blue ones," Nancy said. "They live in the blue butterfly house." Her words hung in the room like a secret key waiting to be turned. Thor lifted his head suddenly, ears pricking at a faint sound outside. The snap of a branch, a rustle along the tree line. He growled low, a warning that danger might not be far. Thomas moved to the window, scanning the mist. The tracks from the Lexus were still etched in the dirt, leading back toward town. Somewhere out there, Mike Caldwell was watching, waiting, or running. Inside the cabin, another truth was waiting to be found. One Nancy had carried unknowingly all along. The cabin settled into uneasy quiet after Nancy's confession. The fire had burned down to coals, their glow pulsing like a heartbeat in the dim light. Kaylee stayed close to the girl, smoothing damp hair from her forehead. Nancy had drifted back into shallow sleep, still clutching her old doll, its fabric worn thin, seams frayed from years of love. Kaylee's gaze lingered on the doll. Something about it tugged at her nurse's instinct. Too heavy for its size, too lumpy in the middle. She leaned closer, careful not to wake Nancy, and ran her fingers along the stitching. The seam was uneven, as if re-sewn by hand. "Thomas," she whispered. He crossed the room, eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Kaylee hesitated, then gently slid the doll from Nancy's slack grip. The child murmured, but did not wake. With steady hands, Kaylee worked at the seam. The thread gave way, revealing a small cavity hidden within the doll's belly. Inside lay a notebook, no larger than a palm, bound in faded leather. Thomas exhaled sharply. Someone wanted this kept safe. Kaylee handed it to him. He opened the cover, scanning the first pages. Most were blank, but near the middle, lines of neat handwriting appeared. At the top of the page was a name that stopped him cold. William Thomas, FBI, his own name. Beneath it, a symbol was drawn, a butterfly with wings shaded in blue. The same image Nancy had whispered about in her dream. For a long moment, Thomas could not breathe. His mind pulled him back years to his days in the bureau. His closest partner had been a man named Anderson, sharp, relentless, unafraid of digging into the darkest corners of corruption. Anderson had died young, leaving behind only rumors of unfinished cases. The butterfly, the code. Anderson had used it once, a quiet signal in their reports for cases involving charities and fraud. Blue butterflies meant follow the money. Thomas closed the notebook slowly, his jaw tight. This wasn't just a child's story. Her mother must have hidden this. Kaylee leaned close, her voice hushed. "Do you think her mother knew about you? About your past?" Thomas's gaze shifted to Nancy, sleeping fitfully, her small hand curled where the doll had been. She must have. Or Anderson told her. Either way, this was left for me to find. Thor padded over, his paws silent against the floorboards. He pressed his nose to the notebook, then lifted his head, amber eyes fixed on Thomas with unblinking intensity. It was as though the dog knew the weight of the discovery. Outside, dawn brightened the mist into a pale silver glow. Somewhere beyond the trees, the world was waking. And on screens across the country, the video of Thor's rescue was spreading faster than anyone could contain. Thomas felt the truth tightening around them. The doll was no toy. The notebook was no coincidence. The butterfly was no dream. It was a map, one that pointed toward a story far bigger than a father's cruelty. He set the notebook on the table, his hand resting on its worn cover. "This is just the beginning," he said softly. "And if what I think is true, Nancy's mother may still be out there." Kaylee's eyes widened, hope and fear colliding in her chest. "Alive?" Thomas nodded once, his voice grim. "Alive. And hunted." Thor shifted at the door, ears pricking, his body taut with readiness. The cabin walls could no longer hold the secret. Beyond them, the fire of the story was spreading, and with it, shadows began to move. By mid-morning, The video of Thor's rescue was no longer just a local curiosity. News anchors in Portland ran it on repeat, their voices measured, each word layered with gravity. "A German shepherd saves a young girl from drowning," one reporter declared. But questions remain about the circumstances that led her into the water. Clips replayed the same sequence. The black car, the wheelchair tipping, the frantic splash, and Thor's dive into the mist. Social media lit with commentary, praise, outrage, suspicion. Hashtags multiplied. Hero Thor was joined by #Justice for Nancy and #Truth at Ravenbrook. Inside the cabin, Thomas and Kaylee watched the screen of Thomas's old television as the station cut to a breaking segment. The anchor's tone shifted. "We've received new information this morning regarding the identity of the child's mother. Authorities had long reported her as deceased in a car accident 2 years ago. But leaked documents suggest otherwise. And now, sources claim she may still be alive." The image changed to a still photo. A woman with dark hair pulled back, intelligent eyes, and a quiet strength in her expression. Tiara Caldwell. Nancy sat upright on the couch, clutching her doll. Her lips parted in a small gasp. "Mommy?" The broadcast continued. Tiara Caldwell, formerly a forensic accountant, specialized in uncovering financial fraud. Before her disappearance, she had been investigating irregularities tied to the Caldwell Foundation, the very charity her husband manages. Records indicate she may have uncovered embezzlement involving millions of dollars. Kaylee's hand flew to her mouth. She knew. Thomas's jaw tightened, and when she discovered the truth, she vanished. The reporter's voice carried on, steady and practiced. Authorities had ruled her death an accident when her car was found near the river. But new evidence, including internal bank reports and testimony from anonymous sources, suggests she went into hiding to protect herself, and possibly to protect her daughter. Nancy's eyes brimmed with tears. She pressed her face into Thor's neck, whispering through trembling lips. "I knew she wasn't gone. I knew it." Thor leaned into her, his chest rising and falling against her cheek, his presence as steady as stone. Thomas muted the television, the silence thick. He spoke slowly, weighing each word. "If Tiara is alive, she left clues. She wanted Nancy to be found, and she wanted the truth to surface. That notebook in the doll wasn't an accident. It was the first breadcrumb." Kaylee's eyes drifted to the worn locket around Nancy's neck. "And maybe there's more. Tiara wouldn't leave her daughter without protection." Nancy's small hands clutched the locket instinctively. She shook her head, unsure, but Thor's amber eyes had already fixed on it. He moved closer, nudging his nose against the chain, his nails scratching lightly at the metal heart as if urging it open. Thomas studied the scene, memory stirring. He had seen mothers hide keys in plain sight during his bureau years, inside jewelry, toys, even books. The simplest places were often the most secure. "Kaylee," he said quietly, "I think she left us another path." The fire in the stove crackled, shadows flickering across the cabin walls. Outside, the mist thinned, giving way to cold daylight. The world beyond their door was filling with questions, theories, and doubt. But inside, the next step lay right in front of them, a secret held against Nancy's heart. Thomas turned back to the muted television, the frozen image of Tiara still glowing on the screen. A woman in the shadows, a mother who had risked everything. He looked to Nancy. "Your mother was clever. If she trusted you with something, we need to see it. It might be the key." Literally. Thor's paw tapped once against the wooden floor, as though confirming the thought. The truth was moving closer, and the locket around Nancy's neck was no longer just a keepsake. Nancy sat quietly on the sofa, her doll tucked under one arm, the locket glinting faintly against her chest. She touched it, as if uncertain whether to keep it hidden or reveal its secret. Thor sat at her feet, tail still, eyes locked on the small pendant, as if the answers to everything lay inside. Kaylee knelt beside Nancy. "Sweetheart, did your mother give that to you?" Nancy nodded. "She said never to take it off. She said it would help me one day." Her voice trembled, caught between loyalty and fear. "Daddy told me it was just a necklace, but I always felt it was more." Thor leaned forward, pawing gently at her lap, nails scratching the chain. He whined low in his throat, a sound both urgent and tender. Thomas's voice was calm, steady. "Nancy, your mother trusted you. She wanted you safe, wanted you. If there is something inside that locket, we need to see it. It might guide us to her." For a long moment, Nancy hesitated. Then, with small, determined fingers, she unclasped the chain and opened the heart-shaped pendant. Inside was a faded photograph of Tiara, smiling, eyes bright with warmth. Taped to the back of the picture was a tiny key, no longer than a child's pinky finger. Kaylee drew in a sharp breath. "She hid it there all along." Thomas took the locket carefully, holding the key between his thumb and forefinger. The metal was cool, ordinary at first glance, but his years in the bureau told him otherwise. It was cut with unusual precision, the kind used for safety deposit boxes in banks, not for houses or trunks. "This isn't for a door," Thomas said, his voice low. "It's a bank key." Nancy's eyes widened. "Mommy always told me banks keep things safe. She said if I ever needed her, the butterflies would lead me." Thor barked once, sharp and decisive, as if affirming the discovery. His paw pressed against Thomas's boot, then against Nancy's knee, his gaze returning again and again to the locket. Thomas closed his hand around the key, the weight of the moment sinking in. "Your mother left this for a reason. She must have hidden evidence, something powerful enough to expose Mike Caldwell and everything he's done." Kaylee's brow furrowed. "But if it's in a bank, how do we even know which one? And how do we get there without drawing attention? The whole town will be buzzing about that video by now." Thomas looked back at the notebook pulled from the doll. Between the scribbles and codes, a single note had been underlined. Box 247, First National. "There," he said, tapping the page. "She gave us the place, the key and the box number. It's all connected." Nancy's small voice broke the silence. "Does that mean we'll find Mommy?" Thomas softened, kneeling so his eyes were level with hers. "It means we'll find the truth. And the truth will bring her closer to you." Nancy held the locket tight once more, pressing it to her heart. "Then we have to go." Thor shifted closer, his massive frame pressed against Nancy's legs. His amber eyes burned with the same resolve. Protector, guide, sentinel. He would not let her face the path alone. Outside, the mist had thinned into a gray sky. The calm of morning was deceptive. A thin veil stretched over approaching storms. Thomas pocketed the key, but unease gnawed at him. The closer they moved toward truth, the more desperate Mike Caldwell would become. He turned to Kaylee. "We prepare carefully. We cannot make a mistake. Caldwell won't give up now." Thor growled softly at the door, muscles tense. The sound carried a warning, and not a minute too soon. Tires crackled against gravel outside, voices carried on the damp air. Thomas froze, every instinct on edge. The shadow they had feared was already at their door. The rumble of engines drew closer, then stilled just outside the cabin. Through the window, Thomas saw 2 patrol cars flanking a sleek black Lexus. The sight sent a chill through him. Mike Caldwell stepped out first, his suit immaculate despite the muddy road. 2 uniformed officers followed, their eyes scanning the clearing. Kaylee's hand tightened on Nancy's shoulder. The child clutched her doll, her breathing quickening. Thor rose, hackles bristling, his body a wall between her and the door. Thomas whispered quickly, "Kaylee, take Nancy. Root cellar, now." Kaylee nodded, lifting the girl into her arms despite Nancy's muffled protest. Thor padded close, nudging them toward the back hallway. With quiet urgency, they slipped behind the pantry door and down the cellar steps, Thor settling at the bottom like a silent guard. The knock came sharp and deliberate. "Sheriff's Department, open up!" Thomas straightened, drawing a steadying breath before unbolting the door. On the porch, Mike's smile was cold and calculated. "Mr. Thomas," he said smoothly, "I believe you have something of mine. My daughter." The lead officer stepped forward. "Sir, we've received a report that a child may be held here against her will." Thomas kept his expression calm. "That child nearly drowned yesterday. My dog saved her life. She's resting with my wife. We've done nothing but protect her." Mike's voice rose, feigning outrage. "Lies! This man and his wife have manipulated my daughter, turned her against me. They've kidnapped her." His tone cracked at the edges, just enough to sound convincing to anyone unprepared. Thomas met his gaze without flinching. "You mean the same daughter witnesses saw you push into Ravenbrook Lake?" The officers shifted uneasily, their eyes flicking between the 2 men. Mike scoffed, his composure tightening. "That video is doctored. Social media garbage. Do you really trust a shaky clip over a father's word?" Thomas leaned against the doorframe, his voice calm but sharp. "I trust what I saw with my own eyes. And I trust the dog who dragged her back to shore. He has no reason to lie." The silence stretched, broken only by the caw of a crow outside. One officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Caldwell, we'll need to verify." Mike cut him off, his voice dropping to a venomous edge. "Verify? You're standing in front of a kidnapper. Search the house, now." The officers looked uncertain, but one stepped toward the porch. Thomas blocked the threshold, his frame steady despite his age. "You have no warrant," he said firmly. "You won't search my home without one." Mike's jaw clenched. His mask of civility faltered, revealing a flash of the predator beneath. "You think you can stand in my way? You're a washed-up lawman hiding behind your mutt and a sick child. This ends tonight." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "You're right. It does end, but not the way you think." For a long moment, the 2 men stared at each other, tension thick as wire stretched to breaking. The officers shifted uneasily, caught in the middle. Then, from deep within the cabin, a sound broke the stalemate. A sharp bark, strong and commanding. Thor's voice cut through the floorboards like a warning bell. Mike stiffened, his eyes darting past Thomas as though he could feel the dog's presence even out of sight. The officer nearest the porch hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should step back until we have clearer authority," Mike snapped. "Do your job." But the fire in his voice betrayed desperation, not control. Thomas folded his arms. "Do as you will. But if you cross this line without cause, you'll regret it. You'll regret it when the truth comes out. And it will." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. For now, they held their ground. Mike turned sharply, his shoes grinding against the gravel. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You have no idea what you've stepped into." He stormed back toward the Lexus, slamming the door behind him. The engines roared to life, the vehicles pulling away, leaving the cabin in tense silence once more. Thomas closed the door slowly, bolting it tight. Kaylee emerged from the cellar moments later with Nancy in her arms, Thor padding beside them, eyes still blazing with restrained fury. Thomas drew in a long breath. That was a warning shot. Next time he won't come with words. He'll come prepared. Kaylee laid Nancy gently on the sofa, her hand brushing the doll's damp dress. Something shifted inside the fabric. She frowned, her fingers probing the seam. With a soft tear, a hidden pocket gave way. From inside, she pulled a small USB drive, wrapped in cloth. Nancy's eyes widened. "Mommy put it there. She said if I ever got lost, the butterflies would guide me." Thomas held the drive in his palm, its weight far greater than its size. His expression turned grim. This might be what Tiara wanted us to find. Her voice, her evidence. The firelight flickered across the cabin walls, painting their faces with shadows. Thor settled at the door, muscles taut, ready for whatever came next. Thomas stared at the USB. "Let's see what she left behind." The USB glinted in the dim light. No larger than a thumb, yet heavy with the weight of secrets. Thomas carried it to the desk in the corner of the cabin, powering up his old laptop. The screen flickered to life, its hum filling the silence. Kaylee settled Nancy on the sofa, the child clutching her doll tightly, eyes fixed on the device as though sensing her mother's presence inside. Thor lay at the door, chest rising and falling, ears tuned to the faintest sound beyond the walls. With a few keystrokes, Thomas opened the drive. A single file appeared. "For Nancy." His throat tightened. He clicked. The video filled the screen. Tiara's face appeared. Drawn, pale, yet steady. Her eyes, so like Nancy's, stared directly into the camera. The background was a dim motel room, its curtains drawn tight. Her voice, low but clear, carried across the years. "If you are watching this, it means I had no other choice. It means Mike discovered too much, and I could not stay. And if I could not stay, then I could not protect Nancy the way I should. Please, whoever has found this, protect her for me." Nancy gasped, pressing her doll to her chest. "Mommy." Kaylee wrapped an arm around the girl, whispering comfort as the message continued. "I worked for years as a forensic accountant. I believed numbers told the truth, that no lie could hide in balance sheets. I was right. But the truth I uncovered was darker than anything I imagined. Mike has been stealing from the Caldwell Foundation, using shell companies to funnel donations into offshore accounts. Money meant for children has filled his pockets. And when I confronted him, he made his intentions clear." Tiara's voice wavered, but her eyes did not leave the lens. "He threatened me. He threatened Nancy. I knew then what I had to do. I left everything, my home, my name, even my daughter, because staying would have meant her death." The screen shifted as Tiara leaned closer, her voice breaking. "If you are Nancy, my sweet girl, I want you to know this. I never abandoned you. I love you more than my own life. The Blue Butterfly House is our promise. Remember it. Follow it, and you will find me." Nancy's small hand reached toward the screen as if to touch her mother's face. Tears glistened on her cheeks. The video cut to documents, scanned ledgers, offshore transfers, insurance contracts. Each file bore Mike's name. Thomas clicked through them in silence. Millions siphoned away, policies taken out not just on Tiara, but on Nancy as well. Kaylee's breath caught. He insured his own daughter's life, for profit. Thomas's jaw clenched. That lake wasn't a moment of madness. It was planned. The final clip returned to Tiara. Her voice was tired now, resigned. If you're seeing this, I may already be gone. But if I'm not, if by some miracle I've survived, then this evidence will bring him down. And to whoever stands in my place, I beg you, protect Nancy. Do what I could not. The screen went dark. For a long moment the cabin was silent, except for the crackle of the fire and Nancy's soft sobs. Thor rose, crossing the room to press his muzzle against her knee. She buried her fingers in his fur, her tears soaking the dog's coat. Thomas closed the laptop gently. His eyes, though weary, burned with purpose. We have the key. We have the evidence. Now we finish what she started. Kaylee looked up. How? We go to Portland, Thomas said. The bank. The safety deposit box. That's where the rest is. Nancy lifted her tear-streaked face, determination shining through. Then we go. Thor barked once, sharp and steady. A vow. The fire cast long shadows as the family began to plan. Soon, they would leave Ravenbrook behind and step into danger greater than anything yet. The morning broke colder than the day before, the mist lifting into a sky streaked with pale gray. Thomas stood by the truck, checking the tires, every movement deliberate. He had driven these roads for years, but today they felt different, heavier, more dangerous. Kaylee guided Nancy out of the cabin, her arms steady around the girl. The child wore a plain hoodie pulled low, her golden curls tucked beneath a baseball cap. Her doll was clutched tight against her chest, the locket hidden beneath the fabric. You look like any other kid going on a trip, Kaylee said softly, adjusting the brim of the cap. That's the point. Nancy managed a small smile, though her eyes still carried shadows. Thor trotted out after them, his fur brushed, his chest broad beneath the service dog vest Kaylee had kept from her late husband's therapy companion. The vest transformed him, official, dignified, almost untouchable. Thomas glanced at him and nodded. Perfect. People won't ask questions if they think he's on duty. They packed quickly, only the essentials: water, food, the laptop, and the USB drive. Thomas tucked the locket key into a small pouch inside his jacket. Then he looked at Nancy. Are you ready, sweetheart? She straightened in her chair, her small voice firm. I want to find Mommy. The engine growled to life, the old truck rumbling down the dirt road. Every mile carried them farther from the quiet of Ravenbrook and deeper into the unknown. Thor sat upright on the floor of the cab, pressed against Nancy's legs, his head turning constantly toward the windows. The journey stretched long, winding through forests and narrow back roads before merging with a wider highway. Thomas kept his eyes sharp, watching the mirrors for the flash of a black Lexus. Kaylee sat in the passenger seat, her hand resting on Nancy's shoulder. We'll get there, love. Just stay quiet and let Thomas handle the talking. Nancy nodded, clutching her doll tighter. The road into Portland pulsed with city noise. Horns, lights, people spilling across sidewalks. To Nancy, it felt overwhelming after the stillness of the lake. But Thor's steady presence anchored her. He nudged her hand with his nose, earning a shaky laugh from the girl. Thomas parked 2 blocks away from the First National Bank, choosing a lot tucked between office buildings. From here on, we blend in. No rushing, no stairs. They stepped out together. Kaylee adjusted Nancy's hoodie once more, then slipped dark glasses over her own eyes. Thomas pulled on an old cap, his shoulders hunched to mask his frame. As they moved toward the bank, Thor walked at Nancy's side, his vest gleaming. Pedestrians glanced at them, but no one lingered. Just another child, a guardian, and two adults. The bank loomed tall, its limestone facade catching the weak sunlight. Glass doors reflected the street, and inside, the marble floors shone. Nancy's grip on her doll tightened. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is it, isn't it?" Thomas nodded. "This is it. We find the box. We find what your mother left for us." Kaylee squeezed Nancy's hand. "And then, we bring her truth to light." They crossed the threshold, the cool air of the lobby washing over them. A receptionist greeted them with a professional smile. Thor's vest drew a respectful glance, but no questions. The bank was quiet, yet Thomas's instincts bristled. The calm felt staged, too polished, as if danger lurked just beyond sight. He scanned the lobby again, his hand brushing the outline of the key in his jacket pocket. The journey had brought them here, but the real test lay ahead. The marble lobby hummed with the faint echo of footsteps and the murmur of clerks at their desks. Thomas led the way to the reception counter, presenting the key with a quiet firmness. The young woman's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly regained her professional tone. "Safety deposit box 247. Please wait here while I get the manager." Minutes stretched like hours, until a middle-aged woman in a navy suit approached. "I'm Diane Larson, the branch manager," she said, her gaze flicking to Nancy, then to Thor. "If you'll follow me, I'll escort you to the vault." They moved as a small unit, Thor steady at Nancy's side, his presence commanding respect. The manager led them into the depths of the bank, down an elevator into a hushed chamber lined with steel drawers. At the far end, she stopped before a box marked 247. "2 keys are required," she explained. "I'll provide one. You have the other." Thomas withdrew the tiny key from his jacket, its metal catching the fluorescent light. He inserted it into the lock as Ms. Larson turned hers. With a simultaneous twist, the mechanism clicked, and the box slid free. On the small table in the adjoining room, Thomas lifted the lid. Inside lay neatly stacked folders, a small recorder, and a photograph of Tiara. Her smile was steady, her eyes the same as Nancy's. The child pressed closer, tears gathering. "That's Mommy," she whispered. Kaylee touched her shoulder gently. "Yes, love. She wanted you to find her." Thomas opened one of the folders. Bank records, signatures, offshore transfers, all linking Mike Caldwell to fraud and embezzlement. The recorder contained a file labeled Testimony. He pressed play. Tiara's voice filled the room, calm and resolute. "My name is Tiara Caldwell. This is my record in case anything happens to me. My husband has been diverting funds from the foundation meant for children into his own accounts. He has taken out policies on my life and, disturbingly, on our daughters as well. If you are hearing this, then please, bring this to the authorities. Protect Nancy." Nancy buried her face into Thor's fur. The German shepherd stood tall, chest heaving, his eyes fixed on the door as though already sensing what would come next. The door swung open with a sudden crack. Mike Caldwell stepped inside, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. His suit was sharp, his tie flawless, but his eyes burned with barely controlled fury. In his hand was a document he brandished like a weapon. "I have a court order," he announced, his voice loud enough to echo. "My daughter is a minor. She is under my custody. These people have kidnapped her. Officers, remove them immediately." The manager froze, caught between procedure and panic. The officers hesitated, their eyes shifting between Thomas, Kaylee, and the trembling girl clutching her doll. Thomas stood, shoulders squared. "Your game is over, Caldwell. The evidence is right here. This is bigger than you can silence." Mike's smile turned thin, dangerous. "Evidence can be buried. Witnesses silenced." His hand slipped into his jacket. Thor's growl rolled through the room, deep and primal. His stance widened, ears flat, amber eyes locked on Mike. "Don't," Thomas warned, his voice low. But Mike ignored him. He pulled a pistol free, leveling it toward the table where Nancy sat. Before anyone could react, Thor launched forward in a blur of muscle and fur. His jaws clamped down on Mike's wrist with crushing precision. The gun clattered to the floor, sliding under the table. Mike screamed, struggling, but the German shepherd held firm, immobilizing his arm without yielding. Nancy gasped, clutching Kaylee's sleeve. The officers stepped forward, one reaching for his radio, the other moving to restrain Mike. The moment stretched. Chaos, shouts, the echo of Thor's growl filling the vault. Thomas placed a steady hand on Nancy's shoulder. "It's all right. Thor's got you." "Schman." And as the echoes faded, Thomas knew this battle was far from finished. The truth still needed a voice, and more allies had yet to arrive. Thor's growl reverberated through the vault, the sound of a guardian who would not yield. Mike writhed beneath his grip, spitting curses as the officers wrestled to restrain him. The pistol lay abandoned on the floor, harmless for the first time. "Get this beast off me!" Mike shouted, his voice cracking under strain. But the moment was already shifting. The vault door opened again, this time not with rage, but with authority. A tall man in an FBI windbreaker stepped inside, flanked by 2 agents. And behind them, her presence quiet yet undeniable, came Tiara Caldwell. Nancy's breath caught in her throat. "Mommy." Tiara's eyes swept the room, sharp and unshaken, though her face bore the weight of years in hiding. She took in the scene, the trembling child, the furious man pinned by Thor, the files spread across the table. Then she spoke, her voice steady. "Robert Caldwell, your lies end here." Mike's eyes widened, disbelief and fury colliding. "Tiara? You're dead. You're supposed to be gone," she finished. "I was, because you left me no choice." She turned to the agents. "You have everything?" One of them lifted a folder. Every document, the financial records, the insurance policies, the recordings, enough to bury him. The manager, Diane Larson, stepped forward, her composure breaking as she clutched the papers Thomas had uncovered. "I can confirm these records are authentic. I saw her open this box years ago. She warned me this day might come." Mike's mask of charm shattered completely. He twisted, trying to lunge for Nancy, but Thor's grip only tightened, forcing him back with a snarl that silenced the room. "Stand down, Caldwell," the FBI agent commanded. He gestured to the officers. "Arrest him, on charges of fraud, embezzlement, attempted murder, and conspiracy." The officers no longer hesitated. They snapped cuffs around Mike's wrists as Thor released his hold, stepping back only once the danger was contained. Mike's voice rose in a final desperate shout. "You'll regret this, all of you. I built everything. Everything you have is because of me." Tiara met his rage with calm steel. "What you built was a house of lies, and now it burns." The agents hauled him upright, his shouts fading as they dragged him from the vault. Silence lingered, broken only by Nancy's quiet sob. Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's finished, child. The truth is in the light now." The FBI agent placed a small recorder on the table. We also have his confession, phone calls, recorded transactions. He thought he was untouchable. Tiara's gaze softened as she turned toward Nancy. The girl's face was pale, streaked with tears, but her eyes glimmered with recognition. "I told you the butterflies would guide you," Tiara whispered. Nancy's lips trembled. "You came back." The moment hung suspended, fragile and luminous, waiting to break into reunion. But for now, Thomas stepped between them, his voice gentle. "Not here. Not yet. There will be time." Tiara nodded, her hands trembling as she clutched the photo that had been inside the box. "I'll wait as long as it takes." Thor stood between them, chest broad, tail flicking once. His amber eyes moved from mother to child, as if urging them closer, as if he alone carried the bridge between the two. Outside the vault, reporters' voices echoed in the lobby. News had already spread. Mike Caldwell arrested at First National Bank. Evidence in hand, video testimony undeniable. The truth was no longer buried. It stood in the open, impossible to silence. And as the agents escorted them out of the vault, Nancy clung to Thor's vest, her small voice carrying only one word, the one that mattered most. "Mommy." The air outside the vault felt different, charged with something deeper than relief. In the marble lobby of the bank, the chaos of reporters and flashing cameras blurred into background noise. For Nancy, the only thing clear was the figure standing a few steps away. Her mother, alive, real, no longer just a memory whispered in dreams. Tiara took a cautious step forward, her hands trembling. "Nancy." Her voice cracked on the name, as though saying it aloud after so long carried too much weight. Nancy blinked, tears streaming freely now. Her voice was no more than a whisper. "Mommy?" And then, with a small cry, she pushed herself from Kaylee's arms, her wheelchair rolling forward. The distance between them seemed endless for an instant, then gone. Tiara dropped to her knees, wrapping her daughter in a fierce embrace. 2 years of silence collapsed in that moment. Nancy buried her face against her mother's shoulder, sobbing into the familiar scent of lavender soap. Tiara clutched her close, kissing her hair, her cheeks, whispering again and again, "I never left you. I never stopped loving you." The reunion drew the eyes of everyone in the lobby. Even the reporters lowered their cameras, struck into silence by the rawness of the scene. Thor, who had been steady and unflinching through every storm, suddenly bounded forward. He pressed into Tiara's arms, nudging his way between mother and child. Tiara laughed through her tears, her hands sinking into his thick coat. "Thor," she breathed, voice breaking, "you still remember me." The German shepherd leaned harder into her, licking her hand, then resting his head against Nancy's lap. His body trembled with joy, as if recognizing his place had never changed, protector of them both. Thomas watched quietly from the side, his weathered face softening. Kaylee clutched his arm, her own eyes damp. "That dog," she whispered. "He's the thread holding them together." Nancy lifted her tear-streaked face, her words muffled against Tiara's embrace. "I dreamed of butterflies, Mommy. I thought it meant you were gone. But it meant you were waiting." Tiara kissed her daughter's forehead, her voice low and sure. "It meant I would find you again. And now we are together. Always." For a long time no one moved. The world seemed to pause, granting them the silence and space to rebuild what had been broken. Around them, agents and officers stepped back, allowing the small family to stand at the center of the moment without interruption. Finally, Tiara rose, keeping Nancy close. She looked to Thomas and Kaylee. "You saved her. You saved my child when I could not." I owe you more than words." Thomas shook his head. "You owe us nothing." It was Thor. He knew before any of us. He carried her out of the water, and he carried her through the fear. Tiara bent to press her forehead against the dog's, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "Thank you, old friend. Thank you for giving her back to me." Thor wagged his tail slowly, his eyes bright, his chest rising with a deep, steady breath. But the moment of peace could not last. Outside, cameras still waited, stories still spun, and Tiara knew the storm was not yet over. She looked at Thomas, resolve settling back into her eyes. "There is a place we can go, safe, hidden, a refuge. It's called Blue Butterfly Haven. That's where I've been waiting. That's where we'll be safe." Nancy clung tighter to her mother's hand, her tears finally easing into the faintest of smiles. Thor stood tall between them, steady as ever, ready to lead the way. The convoy left Portland under the cover of night. FBI vehicles led the way, their lights dimmed, their presence quiet but firm. In the back seat of a black SUV, Tiara held Nancy close, her hand never leaving her daughter's. Thor lay at Nancy's feet, head resting on her lap, his amber eyes catching every flicker of light along the road. Thomas and Kaylee followed in a second car, their faces solemn but relieved. For the first time in days, they felt a measure of safety. Not because danger was gone, but because they were no longer facing it alone. The drive carried them deep into the forest, past winding rivers and roads unmarked on maps. At last, the vehicles turned onto a dirt path hidden by overgrown brush. The trees pressed close, forming a tunnel of green, until the path widened into a clearing. There it stood, Blue Butterfly Haven. A lodge of cedar and stone nestled among towering pines, its windows glowing with warm light. Around it, wildflowers swayed in the evening breeze, and blue butterflies drifted in clusters as if guarding the place. Nancy's eyes widened in wonder. "It's real," she whispered. "The house from Mommy's stories." Tiara kissed the top of her head. "Yes, sweetheart, this is where I've been waiting. Where we can start again." Inside, the lodge was simple, but alive with care. Long wooden tables lined the common hall, maps and charts spread across the walls. Families moved quietly, some with children, others alone. These were people who, like Tiara, had been forced into the shadows by danger, now gathered under the protection of the Bureau. An agent guided them to their rooms, modest, with handmade quilts and a view of the forest beyond. Nancy touched the window pane, her breath fogging the glass. "It feels safe here." Thomas rested a hand on her shoulder. "That's what this place is for." The following morning, life in the haven began. Nancy was introduced to a gentle therapist who specialized in children recovering from trauma. Kaylee stayed close during the first sessions. While Thomas spoke with the agents about next steps, Tiara moved between them, at times a mother, at times a witness in hiding. For Nancy, the first steps were small, stretching her legs, moving her toes, breathing through the pain. Thor never left her side. Each time she faltered, he nudged her with his nose, a quiet push that said, "You are not alone." At night, the group gathered in the common hall. The smell of stew filled the air, voices blending into soft conversation. For the first time in years, Nancy fell asleep in her mother's arms. Thor stretched across the foot of the bed, his chest rising in steady rhythm. Days passed, and the rhythm of haven life settled around them. Tiara worked with agents, preparing testimony. Thomas walked the perimeter at dawn, his instincts refusing rest. Kaylee kept the household steady, filling the gaps no one else could see. But the center of it all was Nancy, whose laughter slowly returned. Each smile was fragile but real, blooming brighter with every session, every story her mother told, every hour with Thor beside her. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the tall windows, Nancy shifted in her chair and gasped. "I felt it," she whispered. "My foot. It moved." Tiara clutched her hand, eyes brimming with hope. Thomas, watching from the doorway, exchanged a glance with Kaylee. Even Thor's ears twitched, as if he understood the weight of the moment. The butterflies outside drifted past the glass, their wings a shimmering promise of change. The morning light poured through the high windows of Blue Butterfly Haven, casting long stripes across the polished wooden floor. Nancy sat at the edge of a padded mat, her hands clutching the arms of her wheelchair. The therapist knelt beside her, speaking gently, while Tiara and Kaylee hovered close. Thor stood in front of her, steady and calm, his amber eyes fixed on hers. His vest had been removed for this session, but his posture was all business. He knew his role: guardian, anchor, guide. Nancy's breath came fast. "I can feel it," she whispered. "My foot. It moved again." "Good," the therapist said softly. "Now let's try something more. Just lean forward, hold Thor's collar, and let him help you." Thomas stood at the doorway, arms crossed, but eyes glimmering with pride. He had seen soldiers fight to reclaim their bodies after battle, but nothing compared to watching this small girl summon courage from somewhere deeper than fear. Nancy reached out, her small fingers brushing Thor's thick fur. The dog didn't flinch. He lowered his body slightly, making it easier for her to grip. His steady warmth seeped into her trembling hands. She inhaled sharply and pressed her feet against the mat. At first, nothing. Then, just enough movement to lift her weight a fraction from the chair. Her arms shook, her breath hitched. Thor held firm, like a pillar of muscle and will. "I can't," she started. But Tiara crouched beside her, voice full of gentle strength. "Yes, you can. You're not alone. Thor's here. I'm here. We're all here." Nancy closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she pushed harder. Her legs quivered, her body rising slowly, painfully, until she was standing, unsteady, clinging to Thor, but standing. Gasps filled the room. Tiara pressed her hands over her mouth, eyes brimming. Kaylee let out a sob she hadn't realized she was holding. Thomas blinked hard, his weathered face breaking into the faintest smile. Nancy wavered, her knees trembling. Her voice cracked. "I'm doing it. I'm really doing it." She stood for only a few seconds before her strength gave way, and she sank back into the chair. But those few seconds lit the room brighter than any sunbeam. Tiara pulled her into an embrace, her tears mingling with her daughter's. "You stood, Nancy. You stood all by yourself." Nancy clutched her mother tightly, crying into her shoulder. "I thought I'd never feel the ground again. But I did." With Thor, the German shepherd pressed his head against her arm, tail wagging slowly, as if he too understood the miracle he had just witnessed. The therapist smiled, eyes shining. "That's the beginning. One step will lead to another. And someday soon, you won't just stand. You'll walk." Nancy wiped her tears, her face still damp but glowing with new light. "If I can stand once, I can do it again." Thor barked once, a sound sharp and proud, filling the room with affirmation. Outside the window, blue butterflies drifted lazily over the garden, their wings flashing in the sun. It felt as though they had gathered to witness the moment, to bless the fragile victory. Thomas cleared his throat, his voice gruff but warm. She's got more fight in her than most men I ever knew. Kaylee squeezed his arm. She has a whole family behind her now. The room stilled in quiet agreement. For the first time in years, hope was no longer fragile. It was solid, standing tall on its own legs. Life at Blue Butterfly Haven soon fell into a rhythm that felt less like refuge and more like home. For Nancy, the days began with therapy in the sunlit hall, where Thor padded beside her as faithfully as a shadow. Each session was followed by lessons, gentle tutoring from volunteers who had once been teachers before finding themselves hidden here. Thomas often sat nearby, reading a newspaper or whittling wood, but always keeping one eye on her progress. Over time, Nancy stopped calling him Mr. Thomas and simply said, "Grandpa." The first time she did, his weathered face softened in surprise, and then he smiled, a rare, unguarded expression. Kaylee, too, slid naturally into the role of grandmother. She baked bread in the Haven kitchen, slipping Nancy warm slices with butter after long therapy sessions. At night, she told stories by the fire, her voice weaving comfort around the girl like a quilt. Nancy began calling her Grandma Kay, a name that made Kaylee's eyes shine each time she heard it. Tiara, though still busy with FBI meetings and testimony preparations, kept Nancy close whenever she could. The mother and daughter spent long afternoons at a table by the window, where Nancy scribbled in a notebook. At first, her words were short, hesitant, but soon they became full sentences, pages of thoughts and memories. "I'm writing a journal," she explained shyly, "so I won't forget. So when I get older, I'll remember how Thor saved me and how Mommy came back." Thor would lie at her feet, lifting his head each time she read a line aloud. Sometimes she added little drawings, clumsy but heartfelt sketches of butterflies, her mother's face, and always Thor standing tall beside her. One evening, an FBI agent named Reed joined them for supper. He had been one of Tiara's protectors during her years in hiding. His quiet humor and gentle patience quickly made him part of the circle. He taught Nancy simple card games and brought her colored pencils for her drawings. "Think of me as your big brother," he teased one evening. "No," Nancy said firmly, giggling. "You're my Uncle Reed." The title stuck, and Reed wore it proudly. He checked in on her daily, never leaving without ruffling Thor's ears or leaving Nancy laughing. Weeks passed, and Nancy's world expanded. She no longer looked only backward to the pain of what had been lost. She leaned forward, reaching for what could still be gained. She studied with her tutors, wrote diligently in her journal, and filled pages of sketchbooks with pictures of Thor and her mother together, framed by wings of blue butterflies. Thomas watched her one afternoon, his carving knife working against a block of pine. "She's healing," he murmured to Kaylee. Kaylee nodded, watching Nancy laugh at something Reed had said. "She's not just healing, she's blooming, like she was always meant to." Tiara glanced up from her daughter's notebook, her hand resting gently over Nancy's. "Because she isn't alone anymore. She has all of us." Thor barked softly, as if in agreement, before lowering his head back onto his paws. His role had not changed. He was still the bridge, still the protector. But now, he was also the symbol of something larger. Family found, family chosen, family rebuilt. Outside, the forest rang with evening birdsong, and butterflies drifted over the clearing. Life had grown roots again, and just ahead, another milestone waited. The first birthday Nancy would celebrate free from shadows, surrounded by those who loved her. The hall at Blue Butterfly Haven glowed with lantern light, the long tables decorated with wildflowers picked from the meadow. For the first time in 2 years, Nancy was about to celebrate her birthday, not in silence or fear, but surrounded by people who cherished her. Her 9th birthday. Kaylee baked a cake with frosting swirled in pale blue, dotted with sugar butterflies. Thomas carved a small wooden figure of Thor, polished smooth and strong, placing it at the center of the table. Reed hung ribbons across the beams, his laughter echoing as children from the haven raced around with paper hats. Nancy sat in her chair, her cheeks pink with excitement. Tiara knelt beside her, brushing curls from her face. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Nancy nodded shyly. "It feels like a dream." When the candles were lit, everyone gathered close, voices rising in a gentle chorus of happy birthday. Nancy closed her eyes, her small hands folded. Her wish was simple, whispered only in her heart. "Let me stand again. Let me walk." As the song ended, Thor nudged her arm, his nose pressing insistently against her hand. He seemed to know what she had wished for. The therapist, waiting quietly at the back, stepped forward. "Would you like to try today, Nancy? Just a few steps? You have your family, your friends, and Thor to hold you steady." Nancy looked around the room. Faces smiled back at her. Her mother's shining eyes, Kaylee's tears of pride, Thomas's steady nod, Reed's encouraging grin. With a trembling breath, she whispered, "Yes, let's try." Thor moved in front of her, lowering his body just enough for her to grip his collar. Nancy pushed against the arms of her chair, her legs quivering. The room fell silent, every gaze fixed on the small girl and the faithful dog. Slowly, unsteadily, Nancy rose. She swayed, gripping Thor tightly. But she was standing, truly standing. A cheer rippled through the crowd, but hushed quickly as she lifted one foot, then the other. One step, another, then a third. Each movement wobbled, her face tight with effort. But Thor matched her pace perfectly, his body a solid anchor against her small frame. By the 4th step, tears streamed down Nancy's cheeks. "I'm walking," she gasped, voice breaking with joy. "I'm really walking." Tiara cried openly, holding her hands to her mouth. Kaylee sobbed into Thomas's shoulder, who cleared his throat gruffly, but let a rare smile break through. Reed clapped, his voice carrying, "That's it, Nancy. You're flying." When her strength finally gave out, Nancy collapsed back into her chair, laughing and crying all at once. The hall erupted in applause, the sound filling every corner of the haven. Tiara hugged her daughter tight. "That's the best birthday gift I've ever seen." Thor stood tall, tail wagging, his eyes bright. Later that evening, after the cake had been cut and gifts opened, another surprise arrived. An FBI official presented a small box to Thomas and Tiara. Inside lay a polished medal engraved with Thor's name. "In recognition of extraordinary bravery and loyalty," the official announced. "Thor is awarded this honor on behalf of the nation." The hall burst into cheers once more as the medal was fastened to Thor's vest. The German shepherd lifted his head proudly, the silver gleams shining against his sable fur. Nancy reached out to stroke him, her voice soft but certain. "You're my hero. Forever." And as the celebration wound down, the hall filled with laughter, music, and the flutter of paper butterflies drifting from the rafters. But when the night grew quiet again, one truth lingered above all else. Thor had given Nancy back her future, one step at a time. The halls of Blue Butterfly Haven grew quiet as night settled over the forest. The day's celebration had left the air full of warmth, laughter lingering like the echo of a song. Now only the soft chorus of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl accompanied the calm. In her room, Nancy lay curled beneath a quilt stitched with butterflies. The candle on her bedside table flickered low, casting gentle shadows across her face. Her breathing was steady, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of peaceful sleep. The doll she had once clung to for comfort rested loosely in her arms, no longer a shield against fear, but a reminder of how far she had come. At the foot of her bed, Thor stretched across the floor. His great body was relaxed, but his eyes stayed half open, ears flicking at the faintest sound. Every breath of wind, every creak of the old lodge boards passed through his awareness. He was watchful even in stillness, the quiet sentinel of the child he had sworn to protect. Tiara stood in the doorway for a long moment, her silhouette framed by the glow of the hall light. She watched her daughter sleep, eyes shimmering with gratitude. She stepped softly into the room, kneeling beside the bed to brush a curl from Nancy's cheek. The girl stirred faintly, but did not wake. Tiara leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have a guardian, my love. A true one. He will never leave you." Thor's head lifted at her words, his amber eyes meeting hers. In them, Tiara saw a depth of understanding that went beyond instinct. She reached out and stroked his fur, the metal from earlier still gleaming faintly on his vest. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving her back her future." Thor blinked slowly, lowering his head again, but his gaze never wavered from the window. Beyond the glass, the moon hung over the treetops, painting the clearing silver. A cluster of blue butterflies drifted lazily in the night air, their wings glowing like fragments of starlight. Thomas and Kaylee paused outside the door, watching the scene. Kaylee wiped at her eyes, whispering, "That child will never feel alone again." Thomas nodded, his voice low, "Because she has what most of us spend a lifetime searching for. A protector who never wavers." Inside, Tiara pulled the quilt a little higher over Nancy's shoulder and kissed her forehead. "Sleep well, my little one. Tomorrow is another step, another day." Nancy sighed softly in her sleep, her lips curving faintly into a smile. Thor shifted, lying down fully now, his massive frame curled near the bed as if to guard not only the child, but the very dreams she carried. His eyes caught the moonlight, glowing with warmth, reflecting loyalty unbroken. The night deepened. The lodge grew silent. Outside, the butterflies continued their dance under the moon, fragile wings carrying promises of renewal. And inside, one image stood eternal. A child safe in her bed, a mother's whispered prayer, and a dog whose devotion stretched beyond fear, beyond time. Thor lifted his head one last time before resting it on his paws. His gaze lingered on the window, on the moon, on the butterflies drifting through the night. His eyes held a quiet certainty, a vow unspoken yet absolute. Forever, he would be her guardian. The story of Nancy, Tiara, Thomas, Kaylee, and above all, Thor, is more than a tale of danger overcome. It is a reminder of the enduring bond between humans and animals and the quiet strength that German shepherds carry in their hearts. Thor was not simply a dog. He was a guardian, a bridge between despair and hope, a living symbol of loyalty that never wavered, even in the darkest moments. Through his courage, Nancy rediscovered her future. Through his steadfast presence, Tiara reclaimed her daughter. And through his watchful eyes, a broken family found the courage to rebuild. The ripples of his devotion stretched far beyond one cabin, one lake, or one bank vault. They touched everyone who witnessed his story, showing that compassion, loyalty, and love are forces far stronger than greed or fear. German shepherds, known for their intelligence and loyalty, remind us of what is best in ourselves. They teach us that protection is not about power, but about sacrifice. That love is not spoken in words, but shown in actions. And that healing often begins in the quiet moments we share with those who stand by us without judgment. This story is also an invitation to treat animals with the respect they deserve, to honor their silent gifts, and to see them not as possessions, but as partners in life. Each act of kindness we extend to them returns to us multiplied, often in ways we could never predict. In the end, Nancy's laughter, Tiara's embrace, and Thor's steady watchfulness form a picture of hope. That even after betrayal and loss, love can rise again, carried on the wings of loyalty and guarded by the gentle strength of a dog who will forever remain a protector.